Lorit stretched out his hand to Chihon and took hers, searching her mind for the place where she saw the boy being held captive. He recognized it immediately, the Temple of Ran in Veldwaite. He'd been tortured there himself and knew every square inch of the place. He called to mind the smell of smoke from the torch set in the wall above the altar, the stench of dried blood from the previous sacrifices, the damp stones that collected the morning dew. He recalled the faint sounds he'd heard while bound to that altar, how he could make out the footsteps of the priests occasionally walking past the room where they had held him captive. They had often left him alone to think about his predicament, and those footsteps had terrified him the most. He had never known if they belonged to a priest passing by on routine business, or if they signaled that the torture would soon begin again. Lorit tasted his own blood as the memory of his torture came flooding back to him. He recalled every detail of his ordeal in that room, and was all part of the travel spell, but it renewed his hatred of the temple, and that interfered with his magic. He calmed his anger and made the altar room real. He grasped his magic, strengthened his connection to Chihon, and pulled. The study dissolved around them and was replaced by the cold stone walls of the altar room in Veldwaite. The slight wrenching of the travel spell was over quickly. Sturdy rope bound the boy to the altar by his hands and feet. He lay there on his back, robe spread open to expose his flesh to the priest. He was about 14 summers in age, just when magic awakens in a boy. He was thin for his age, with sandy brown hair, hazel eyes, and a sharp nose. The priest passed his staff across the altar, and the boy arched his back as his muscles spasmed with pain. He moaned through clenched teeth, but no words came from him. The priest leaned in. "I will have your magic, with you or without you. It's your choice." The priest's shaved head and black robes with silver piping marked him as a high priest of Ran. Lorit glanced at Chihon. Was it possible the priest hadn't noticed the sudden appearance of a wizard and sorceress? Was this the new high priest of Ran and Veldwaite, one so weak in magic? "I think that's enough." Lorit stepped out of the shadows, raising his shield. The priest paused his ministration and looked up at Lorit. "I've been expecting you." He raised his staff and advanced. Lorit quickly glanced at Chihon, signaling her to free the boy while the priest was distracted. The priest's magic pressed in on him. It was dirty and twisted, a mixture of all the power the priest had absorbed from his victims. It would have been easy to incinerate the priest where he stood, but Lorit had been admonished that killing priests would ferment a war that he could not win. Lorit strengthened his resolve, raised his hand, and created a fireball. It appeared as a violet sphere of lightning, twisting in on itself, spinning and spitting sparks. He held it ready, watching the priest, waiting. The priest raised his staff, and lightning leaped from the jewel in its head, piercing Lorit's shields. Lorit's fireball shattered in his hand, sending a cascade of violet sparks flowing across the floor before vanishing. Lorit took a step backward until his back was against the rough, cold rock wall. A sharp stone stabbed him through his robe. He winced and stretched out his hand, creating a second fireball. This one was even smaller and more innocuous-looking than the first. Would the priest believe this was his best effort? Lorit tried to look frightened and weak as he threw the fireball at the priest. The priest raised his staff, and lightning flashed out to intercept Lorit's fireball. Lorit pinched his eyes shut and braced himself as an explosion filled the chamber with a blinding flash and a deafening crack. The impact pressed him against the wall. He saw the flash through his closed eyelids. The priest would be momentarily blinded, and his magic impaired for the few heartbeats that Lorit and Chihon needed to get the boy out of there. Lorit sidestepped the stunned priest and dashed for